She left him with nothing, her husband, the man she once trusted, the father of their child. He thought he had won, laughing as she walked away, humiliated. But what he didn't know was that her return wasn't a plea for help. It was the beginning of his worst nightmare. One phone call, one move, and everything he had built would come crashing down. How far would he go to protect his empire? And how far would she go to make sure he paid for everything? Sophia stood at the entrance of the office building, the familiar building where she had once spent countless hours with Mark. The company they had built together from the ground up was now nothing more than a hollow shell of what it once was. She had left him with nothing, not just material things, but her heart, her soul, and her trust. The memories of their marriage haunted her, but her strength had grown in the years since. As she stepped inside, she could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. She wasn't just here for closure. She was here to take what was hers. It was time for Mark to face the consequences of his actions. Sophia hadn't thought she would ever return to this place. She had left him behind after years of manipulation, deceit, and emotional abuse. Mark had always been charming, a master of turning the world around him in his favor. He had convinced people that they were the perfect couple, that their success was a result of teamwork. But it was all a lie. Sophia had done the work. She had built the company's technology from the ground up, staying up late, coding, and brainstorming, while Mark attended social events and made connections. When they'd finally hit it big, he had taken all the credit. The last straw had been the betrayal of her trust, in more ways than one. That's when she had walked out. Her return now wasn't for reconciliation. It was for justice. Mark had reached out, desperate, his company teetering on the edge of collapse. He was facing a financial crisis, one he couldn't escape alone. His reputation was in ruins, and without Sophia, his business was crumbling. He needed her to save him. But Sophia knew better than to believe that he had changed. This was just another ploy. He wanted to use her once again, just as he always had. But this time, it wasn't going to work. As she sat at her desk, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Emily, her lawyer and trusted friend. "I've got everything ready. You know what to do." Sophia took a deep breath, her fingers hovering over the screen. This wasn't just about saving a company. This was about taking back control of her life. She had spent too long being afraid, too long hiding behind Mark's manipulations. But now she was stronger, and she was ready to fight. She wasn't just going to expose him, she was going to destroy him. The message from Emily had set everything into motion. Sophia had already gathered her team. Lucas, her trusted investor and ally, had secured the necessary backing to reclaim what was hers. The game was on. But there was one more thing that needed to be done before she made her move. She needed to confront Mark in front of the people who had once supported him, the board of directors. It was time to show them the truth. Mark had always prided himself on being the face of the company. He was the one who spoke at press conferences, who smiled and charmed potential investors. But behind closed doors, he was a different man. He had used people, manipulated them for his gain, and destroyed anyone who threatened his fragile ego. Sophia had always known this, but now she had the proof to back it up. The day of the board meeting arrived, and Sophia walked into the conference room with her head held high. The once familiar faces of the board members stared at her, some with surprise, others with a hint of fear. They had expected Mark to walk in confidently, to charm them all over again. Instead, it was Sophia who commanded the room. She didn't need to speak at first. She simply set down a folder in front of the chairman, allowing the weight of the evidence to speak for itself. Sophia had known the board would be skeptical. They had always been loyal to Mark, and his charm had kept them in line. But the documents she had presented couldn't be ignored. Financial records, contracts, emails, all pointing to one undeniable truth. Mark had been hiding the company's financial misdeeds. For months, he had manipulated the numbers, inflated profits, and hidden losses to present a false image of success. And all of it had been done under his watch, while Sophia had been kept in the dark. Mark's face turned red as he tried to regain control of the meeting. He muttered under his breath, trying to downplay the evidence. "This is all fabricated," he claimed, his voice shaking. But Sophia could see the cracks beginning to form in his facade. The board members, once so loyal to him, were beginning to exchange uncomfortable glances. The doubt had already started to set in. Sophia didn't waste any time. She continued to speak, her voice steady and calm, as if this moment had been a long time coming. "The truth is simple," she said. "This company has been built on lies, and you all know it. Mark has used you, manipulated you into believing he was the genius behind it all. But it was me, the one you pushed aside, the one you failed to recognize." She paused, letting her words sink in. Mark's eyes widened as he tried to interrupt, but Sophia cut him off. "It's over, Mark," she said softly, but with authority. "I've built a future for myself. You can no longer use me, and you can no longer hide behind me." The room was silent. The board members were looking at Mark, the man they had once trusted, with uncertainty. It was clear that the loyalty they had once shown him was quickly eroding. Sophia's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Emily. "The federal investigation is in motion. They're moving on the financial fraud." Sophia smiled to herself. This was the final nail in Mark's coffin. He was finished. Mark stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You think you've won? You think you can just walk back in here and take everything from me?" His voice was filled with rage, but it wasn't the confidence he once had. It was desperation. The mask was slipping. Sophia stood facing him squarely. "I'm not here to take anything from you," she said. "I'm here to make sure you pay for what you've done." She turned to the chairman. "I'm submitting my proposal for the company's future, a future without lies, without manipulation." The chairman nodded slowly, his face pale. "We will need time to review the documents," he said, but there was no doubt in his voice. The decision had already been made. Sophia had won. Mark's time was up. As the meeting adjourned, Mark tried to salvage his dignity. He spoke in hushed tones with a few of the remaining board members, trying to convince them to stick with him. But Sophia had already ensured that the majority would side with her. It was only a matter of time before Mark was out of the picture for good. Walking out of the conference room, Sophia could feel the weight of the years lifting from her shoulders. She had done it. She had faced her past, exposed the truth, and reclaimed her power. The journey had been long, but it was far from over. Outside the building, Sophia stood for a moment, looking out at the city skyline. The world was wide open to her now. She had her company, her integrity, and a new sense of freedom. She had left Mark with nothing, but in the end, she had found everything she needed within herself. Sophia hadn't expected things to move so quickly. The sudden shift in the atmosphere after the board meeting left her feeling both relieved and invigorated. She could hear Mark's voice in the background trying to rally his remaining supporters, but it felt distant, like the fading echo of a storm that had passed. As she made her way down the sleek hallways of the office building, she felt a momentary sense of triumph. But she didn't let herself linger in that victory. She knew this wasn't over yet. Back in her office, Sophia collapsed into the chair, her hands trembling slightly as she looked out the window. It had been a long time since she had felt such control. The company that Mark had stolen from her, the life he had stolen from her, was finally in her hands again. She thought about her son, Alex, who had grown up without a father figure in his life. She had promised him that she would never let him suffer the way she had. This was for him. This was her way of showing him that strength wasn't just about surviving. It was about rebuilding after the worst of situations. The sound of her phone vibrating broke her thoughts. It was Emily. "They've made their move," the message read. "The feds are going after the accounts, and Mark is going to try to make a run for it." Sophia's stomach tightened. She knew Mark's arrogance, his need to run away from any consequences. But this time, he wasn't going to get away. She wasn't going to let him escape, not this time. Sophia's fingers flew over her phone, quickly typing out a reply. "Get the team ready. I'm not waiting any longer. We do this now." She had planned for this moment for months, making sure she had every legal angle covered, every piece of evidence in place. But she also knew Mark wasn't the kind of man who would go down without a fight. His ego would push him to do something rash, and she was counting on that. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen of her laptop. The documents she had presented at the board meeting weren't just the tip of the iceberg. Sophia had one more ace up her sleeve. It was the final piece of the puzzle, a series of recordings that would prove once and for all Mark's involvement in a larger conspiracy to defraud investors, manipulate stock prices, and erase his tracks. The recordings had been made months ago when he thought she wasn't paying attention. But Sophia had always known. She had always been one step ahead, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Lucas, are you ready?" she typed quickly. A moment passed before he replied. "We're set. Just say the word." Sophia nodded to herself. She had already made her decision. It was time to take down Mark completely, to expose him not just for his crimes, but for the man he truly was. She was no longer the scared woman who had walked out on him years ago. She was the woman who had rebuilt her life, who had taken back everything he had tried to steal from her. And now she was going to make sure he paid for everything. Her phone buzzed again. It was a news alert. Mark Matthews, CEO of Matthews Technologies, under federal investigation for securities fraud and manipulation of financial records. Sophia couldn't help but smile. She had expected this. She knew the authorities would move fast once they had the evidence. But what Mark didn't know was that it wasn't just his company that was under scrutiny. It was everything he had ever done, and the walls were closing in on him. The moment felt like a final, decisive turn in the game. Sophia had waited for years for this, but it wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about making sure no one would ever again be able to manipulate and destroy people the way Mark had done to her. And when this was over, she would be the one standing on top, not him. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and final preparations. Sophia kept her focus sharp, as she had always done when the stakes were high. Emily had been working tirelessly, ensuring that the legal documents were airtight, while Lucas had been gathering financial backing and making sure the media was ready to spin the story in her favor. The plan was in motion, and there was no turning back now. Sophia's office had become a war room. Her team was on the phone constantly, coordinating with her lawyers and the federal investigators. The pressure was mounting, but she thrived under it. It had been years since she had felt this alive, this in control of her future. The quiet, methodical way she had been building her empire was paying off now. The board had already turned against Mark, and his supporters were beginning to question his every move. But Sophia knew the real battle was just beginning. She met with Emily in the late afternoon, sitting across from her at a small table in her office. "This is it. Everything we've worked for," Emily said, her voice steady. "Once the feds move in, it's going to be a media storm. We need to be ready for the fallout." Sophia nodded, her mind already racing ahead to the next step. "I know. But we can't let him turn this into a public spectacle. He'll try to paint me as the villain, the woman scorned. We have to be prepared to counter that narrative, and fast." Emily smiled, a sharp, knowing look in her eyes. "We've got that covered. I've arranged for an exclusive interview with a major network. You'll tell your side of the story first before Mark has the chance to twist it." Sophia's gaze softened slightly. Emily had always been her rock, the one person who had never doubted her. "Good. We'll need to hit them with the truth, the whole truth, not just what's convenient for us." As they continued to strategize, Sophia's phone buzzed again. It was a message from Lucas. "It's happening now. The feds are closing in on Mark's offices. They'll be at his house within the hour. Sophia felt a rush of adrenaline course through her veins. This was the moment she had been waiting for, but the feeling wasn't quite as satisfying as she had imagined. It was more than just victory. It was the beginning of something much bigger. She wasn't just taking Mark down, she was reclaiming her life. With the federal agents closing in, Sophia knew she needed to act quickly. She couldn't let Mark or anyone else turn the tables. She called a final meeting with her team. They gathered in the conference room, their faces filled with anticipation. "Here's what we're going to do," Sophia began, her voice commanding. "We need to make sure that when the press gets hold of this, it's our version of the story they're hearing. We'll lead with the truth, no more hiding behind Mark's lies. We're not just fighting for the company anymore. We're fighting for justice." As she spoke, the weight of what she was about to do settled in. She wasn't just about to bring Mark's world crashing down. She was going to build something new in its place. The idea of taking the company back wasn't just about proving a point. It was about showing the world that it was possible to start over no matter how broken you might feel. Sophia glanced at her phone again. The time had come. The feds were closing in, and the world was about to see Mark for who he truly was. Her heart raced, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the excitement of finally being free. "Let's go," she said to her team, standing up and walking out of the room. "We have work to do." Sophia walked through the halls of the building, her heels clicking softly against the polished floors. Her mind was focused, her movements deliberate. Everything she had worked for had led up to this moment. As she passed her employees, some looked up from their desks, their eyes following her, but none dared to say a word. There was an unspoken understanding among them now. Sophia was no longer the woman who had been betrayed. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who would no longer be overlooked or silenced. In the elevator, she stood alone, her reflection in the mirror as she adjusted her suit jacket. The woman who had left years ago, broken and defeated, was long gone. This woman was different. She had found her strength, her voice, and now she was ready to reclaim everything she had lost. Her grip on her phone tightened as she received another text from Emily. "The agents are in. Mark is in custody. The investigation is underway." A wave of satisfaction washed over her, but it was short-lived. There was still work to be done. As the elevator doors opened to the executive floor, she was met with a sight that felt both familiar and foreign. The large, glossy conference room sat at the end of the hall, and Sophia knew that Mark would be there soon enough, probably trying to salvage what little dignity he had left. But it was too late for him. Sophia had already secured the future of the company, and her future. She was ready for the final confrontation. She entered the conference room and sat at the head of the table, the position that once belonged to Mark. As she settled in, the door opened and Emily stepped inside, followed by Lucas. The three of them exchanged knowing looks. It wasn't just about the company anymore. This was about closing a chapter of her life that had been left unfinished for too long. "I've spoken with the network," Emily said, breaking the silence. "They're ready for the interview tomorrow. It's time for you to tell your side of the story. We've set up the media angle, and once we release the interview, the narrative will be ours." Sophia nodded, her mind already running through the talking points. She wasn't just going to tell them what had happened. She was going to expose the truth about Mark. Everything he had done to her, everything he had done to the company. He had betrayed her trust, lied to everyone around him, and now it was time for the world to see who he really was. Before she could respond, Lucas spoke up. "We've managed to freeze most of his accounts, and the federal agents are already going through the assets. They're going to find more than just financial fraud, Sophia. This could bring down his entire empire." Sophia's eyes flickered with determination. "Let them. He deserves every bit of it. He thought he could destroy me, but in the end, he's the one who's destroyed. Everything he's built is about to crumble, and I'm going to make sure the world knows exactly how it happened. Just then, the door swung open, and Mark walked in, flanked by his legal team. His face was a mixture of disbelief and anger. He had been expecting a confrontation, but nothing prepared him for the realization that Sophia had already won. The sight of her sitting at the head of the table, calm and composed, while he was reduced to nothing, stung more than he could admit. "You think you can just take everything from me?" Mark sneered as he stood at the door, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "You're nothing but a bitter woman who can't accept that you've lost. You'll never be the leader I am." Sophia didn't flinch. She had heard those words 1,000 times before, but now they meant nothing. She stood up slowly, her gaze never leaving Mark's face. "No, Mark," she said, her voice steady and strong. "What I am is the woman who walked away from you when I realized you would never change. I'm the woman who built this company from the ground up, who stayed up late working while you played the role of the charming CEO. You thought you could control me. You thought I would stay in the shadows, but I'm done hiding. I'm done letting you take what's mine." Mark's face darkened, but he was starting to realize that Sophia wasn't the same person she had been all those years ago. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was the one who had taken back control, and she was about to make sure that no one, not even him, could take that away. "This isn't over," Mark growled, his eyes narrowed. "I'll make sure everyone knows you're the one who destroyed everything. You'll never come out of this unscathed." Sophia took a step toward him, her expression unwavering. "You can try, Mark, but the truth will come out. The world will know exactly who you are, and they'll see that the only person who's destroyed everything is you." With those words, she turned to Emily and Lucas, signaling that the time had come. Mark's fate was sealed. The company was hers, and nothing could change that now. As she watched him struggle, she knew the battle was over, and she had won. Sophia stood at the window of the conference room, gazing out over the city as Mark's words echoed in her ears. He still thought he could intimidate her, still believed that his words would have any effect. But she had moved far beyond that. The strength she had gained from her years of silence and struggle was now her shield. She wasn't the woman he had discarded. She was the woman who had rebuilt herself, and she was unshakable. The meeting had ended abruptly, with Mark's legal team trying to salvage what they could. His threats, empty as they were, meant little now. What mattered was the truth, and Sophia knew it would all come out. As she turned away from the window, she felt a sense of finality in the air. The storm had passed, but the repercussions were far from over. The following morning, Sophia stood in front of the camera, preparing for the interview. The network had set up in a quiet studio, the lights bright and unforgiving. But she didn't mind. This was her moment, and she wasn't about to waste it. Emily had coached her well, helping her frame everything in a way that would leave no room for Mark's lies. But Sophia knew that this wasn't just about the company. This was about her, about the woman who had survived and thrived, despite everything Mark had done to tear her down. "Are you ready?" the interviewer asked, adjusting the microphone and checking the camera. Sophia gave a brief nod, her expression calm. "I'm ready." The interview began, and Sophia's voice, steady and confident, filled the room. She talked about her years at the company, about how she had helped build the technology that had made it a success. But she didn't stop there. She didn't just talk about the glory and the achievements. She spoke of the darkness, of how Mark had manipulated everyone around him, including her, how he had taken credit for everything she had done, leaving her in the shadows. "There's a narrative out there that Mark built this company," she said, her voice unwavering, "that he was the genius behind everything we accomplished. But the truth is, he wasn't. I was the one who created the technology that revolutionized this industry. I was the one who stayed up nights, working on the code while Mark attended events, charming investors, and looking for ways to take the spotlight. I gave him credit because I believed in the partnership we had. But over time, I realized that he was only using me. I wasn't just a partner. I was a tool to him. The interviewer listened intently, hanging on every word. The truth was coming out, and Sophia could feel the weight of it lifting off her shoulders. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She wasn't here to seek revenge. She was here to reclaim her story, to show the world that she was more than just Mark's wife. She was Sophia Walker, and she had built something that would last. "Why didn't you speak out sooner?" the interviewer asked, her voice softening with genuine curiosity. Sophia paused for a moment, looking directly into the camera. "I believed in him. I thought we were a team, that we were building something together. I ignored the signs, hoping things would get better. But when I realized that he was willing to tear everything down to save himself, I knew I couldn't stay any longer. I had to leave." Her voice faltered for a split second, but only for a moment. She had come too far to break now. Leaving was the hardest decision I've ever made, but it was the only decision I could make. The interview continued, but Sophia was no longer just telling her story. She was shaping the narrative. She spoke about the toll Mark's behavior had taken on her, the emotional strain, the constant manipulation. She didn't shy away from the difficult parts. She was raw, but she was real. And that was more than Mark had ever been. When the interview ended, Sophia felt a weight lift from her chest. The cameras turned off, and the crew began packing up. But as she stood up, she knew this was just the beginning. The world had heard her side of the story, but the battle wasn't over. Mark was still out there, still trying to spin his version of events. But she had already won. Later that evening, as Sophia sat in her office, reviewing the footage from the interview, a message came through from Lucas. "We've got the proof we need. The feds are closing in on Mark. It's happening faster than we thought. We need to be prepared." Sophia closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. The pieces were falling into place. The federal investigation was gaining momentum, and Mark's empire was crumbling faster than anyone had anticipated. She had made sure of it. But it wasn't just about taking him down. It was about ensuring that the company, the one she had built from nothing, would rise again, and this time it would be on her terms. Her phone buzzed again, and it was Emily. "The interview is trending. You're trending. The media is starting to turn in your favor." Sophia smiled softly. The truth was finally out there, and Mark's worst nightmare had only just begun. The next few days felt like a whirlwind for Sophia. The media was buzzing with her interview, and the tide of public opinion was swiftly turning in her favor. News outlets were finally starting to paint her as the victim, the woman who had been betrayed and silenced for far too long. But it wasn't just the media attention that kept her on edge. It was the constant stream of updates about the federal investigation into Mark's finances and the mounting pressure he was facing. His life, as he knew it, was unraveling. Sophia was back in her office, her desk now a battleground for countless phone calls, emails, and meetings. She sat at the head of the table, her laptop open in front of her, reviewing the final draft of a restructuring proposal for the company. It wasn't just about protecting the business anymore. It was about setting a new course, one that would restore integrity and transparency after everything Mark had done to ruin it. She had spent hours working on the new direction, ensuring it would be a company that would not only survive the scandal, but thrive in the aftermath. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Emily stepped in, holding a folder with some papers. "We've got the final figures for the restructuring plan, and the board's approval is almost certain, but I just got off the phone with the feds." Emily's face was serious, a hint of concern in her eyes. "They've found more, much more." Sophia's pulse quickened, but she stayed calm. "What do you mean? What else did they find?" Emily placed the folder on the table and sat across from Sophia. "Mark's been hiding millions of dollars in offshore accounts. It's worse than we thought. They've traced some of it back to his dealings with a shell company he set up in the Caribbean. The feds are about to file charges for money laundering, securities fraud, and tax evasion. His entire network is coming down, and it's not just about the company anymore. It's personal. He's going to lose everything. Sophia leaned back in her chair, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. This wasn't just a corporate scandal anymore. This was a criminal case that would send Mark to prison for a long time. She had known it was bad, but she hadn't expected it to escalate this quickly. Yet there was a part of her that felt a sense of justice in it. Mark had spent years destroying everything in his path to get ahead, and now it was all catching up with him. "This is it, isn't it?" Sophia said softly, almost to herself. "It's over for him," Emily nodded. "It's over. But you need to be prepared for the media frenzy when the charges drop. They'll spin it as a personal vendetta. He'll try to paint you as a villain. You need to keep your story straight. The world is watching." Sophia's gaze hardened, and for the first time in days, a slight smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. "Let them. Let Mark try to spin his lies. I'm not running anymore. He's the one who's been running from the truth all this time. Now it's time for him to face it." Emily looked at her, her expression a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're going to need to be careful. He's desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things." Sophia's mind began to race. She knew Emily was right. Mark wouldn't go down quietly. He had always believed that his charm and manipulation could get him out of anything, but this time there would be no escaping the consequences of his actions. She picked up her phone, dialing Lucas's number. It rang only once before he picked up. "Sophia!" His voice was clipped but steady. "We've got a problem." Sophia didn't wait for him to explain. "Mark," she said firmly. "He's going to make a move, isn't he?" "Exactly," Lucas replied. "We've traced some of his communications, and he's planning something big, a final attempt to secure a sale with Global Tech. He's hoping to cash out before the charges hit. He's talking to the board members again, trying to convince them this is all a mistake." Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Not going to happen. We can't let him sell the company now. I won't let him turn this into another one of his escape plans." She turned to Emily. "We need to stop the sale, now." Emily didn't hesitate. "I've already spoken to Marcus. He's on board, and the board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. We'll be ready to block it." Sophia nodded. "I need a full report on his financials before the meeting. If there's any way we can prove this sale is fraudulent, we need to have it ready." Emily stood. "Consider it done." As she walked out, Sophia stared at her phone screen for a moment, deep in thought. She knew Mark wouldn't go down without a fight. The walls were closing in on him, and his desperation would make him dangerous. She had to be ready for whatever move he made next. That night, as Sophia prepared for the next battle, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of something bigger than just taking back her company. She was about to witness the fall of Mark Matthews, the man who had ruined everything she had once believed in, and she would be the one to ensure that he paid for every lie, every manipulation, and every betrayal. The following day, as the board meeting drew closer, Sophia felt the calm before the storm. This was it. It was time to finish what she had started. The day of the board meeting arrived, and Sophia couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and calm determination. She had spent the last few weeks preparing for this moment, making sure every detail was covered. The media was watching, the feds were closing in on Mark, and the board members were starting to waver. There was no turning back now. Sophia entered the boardroom, her footsteps measured and deliberate. The familiar faces of the board members greeted her with varying degrees of discomfort, but no one dared to challenge her anymore. It wasn't just the truth of what had happened that had changed the tide. It was the confidence she exuded now. She was no longer the broken woman who had walked out years ago. She was the leader of this company, and no one, not even Mark, could take that away from her. As she took her seat at the table, she could feel Mark's presence looming. His absence was almost as powerful as his presence had once been. He had tried to stage his comeback, But the narrative had already shifted. The board knew it. They knew who had built the company, who had created the technology that had made it successful. And they knew who had been responsible for the mess it had become. Mark's charm and lies could only take him so far. The meeting began, and Sophia didn't waste any time. She opened her laptop, pulling up the restructuring plan that she had worked on for so long. The first thing she addressed was the looming sale to Global Tech. She knew that Mark's last-ditch attempt to sell the company was his final move to escape the consequences of his actions. But she wasn't going to let him do it. "I'm sure you're all aware of the proposal from Global Tech," Sophia began, her voice steady and clear. "But what you might not know is the full extent of what Mark Matthews has done to this company. The sale is not just a business transaction. It's a desperate attempt to cover up his crimes." She paused, letting her words settle. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, but no one interrupted. Mark has been manipulating the financials for years. He's been hiding money in offshore accounts, inflating the company's worth, and misrepresenting its actual performance. And now, as he faces federal charges for money laundering and fraud, he's trying to sell this company off to Global Tech to avoid paying the price for his actions. Sophia's voice was calm but firm. She could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on her. "I'm not here to fight over who gets the company. I'm here to make sure that the future of this company is in the hands of someone who can restore its integrity and bring it back to what it was meant to be, a company built on trust, transparency, and hard work." She turned to the chairman of the board, who had been silent throughout her statement. "I'm requesting that we halt this sale, effective immediately, until a full audit is conducted. The board needs to understand the true state of this company before we make any decisions about its future." The chairman looked at her, his face a mixture of concern and skepticism. "Sophia, this is a drastic move. We've already been under pressure from Global Tech. The deal has already been set in motion." Sophia leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "The deal was set in motion under false pretenses. If you proceed with this sale without fully understanding the truth, it will be your responsibility when the consequences come crashing down. And believe me, they will." There was a tense silence in the room as the board members processed her words. Some were visibly uncomfortable. Others were looking down at the table, unsure of what to do. Sophia had expected this. Mark had spent years building his reputation with the board, using his charm and promises of success. But Sophia had built the company. She had done the work. And now she was going to take it back. She took a deep breath, ready to make her next move. "I'm also requesting a full investigation into Mark's actions, not just the sale, but the entire operation. I've already gathered evidence of financial misconduct. I have recordings, documents, and insider accounts that will prove beyond a doubt that Mark has been lying to all of you." The room shifted as the board members looked at one another, murmurs of disbelief starting to spread. Mark's empire was beginning to crumble right before their eyes, and there was no way to stop it now. They could either continue to side with him, or they could face the reality of his betrayal. Sophia's phone buzzed on the table, and she glanced at it briefly. It was a message from Lucas. "The feds are moving in on Mark's accounts. It's happening now. He's not getting away." She smiled to herself, the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. She turned her attention back to the room, her voice calm but resolute. "The federal investigation is already underway, and Mark will be facing the consequences of his actions. But the company needs to move forward. The board needs to make a decision. Do we continue to support the man who betrayed us, or do we choose a new path?" One by one, the board members began to speak, their voices hesitant at first, but growing stronger, as they realized the truth of what Sophia was saying. They had seen the evidence, heard the stories, and now they understood the depth of Mark's betrayal. The decision was becoming clear. Finally, the chairman stood, his face pale but resolute. I move that we suspend Mark Matthews from all corporate duties immediately and conduct a full audit of the company's financials. We will not proceed with the sale to Global Tech until this investigation is complete. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Sophia felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew the fight wasn't over. This was just one battle in a war that had been waged for years. Mark's defeat was inevitable, but the road ahead would still be difficult. As the meeting concluded, Sophia stood up, her back straight and her head high. She had done it. She had taken control of the company, and now, with the board's support, she would lead it into a new era. She had finally proven that the truth could not be silenced. Sophia walked out of the boardroom, feeling a sense of finality wash over her. She had won, but as she stepped into the elevator, she couldn't shake the feeling that Mark wasn't done yet. Desperate men did desperate things. She would have to stay vigilant, but for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe again. The following days were a blur of press conferences, legal discussions, and the mounting realization that Mark's downfall was imminent. Sophia was prepared for the chaos, but nothing could quite prepare her for the flood of emotions that came with finally seeing the company moving in the right direction. It felt surreal, almost like a dream. The company she had once built from the ground up, the one Mark had stolen from her, was now under her control again. But as the world watched the investigation unfold, Sophia knew it wasn't over. The media was buzzing, the board was turning, but Mark wasn't finished yet. The phone rang in the late afternoon as Sophia sat in her new office. She had taken Mark's seat, but it didn't feel quite the same. She had never cared about the title. It wasn't the corner office she had sought after. It was the opportunity to restore the integrity of the company. The phone call was from Emily. "Are you sitting down?" Emily's voice was tense. Sophia leaned forward, a knot of dread forming in her stomach. "What's happened?" "There's been a development," Emily began, her voice laced with urgency. "Mark's legal team just filed a temporary injunction to halt the audit. They're trying to delay the investigation, claiming that the sale to Global Tech is essential for the company's survival." Sophia felt her heart race. Of course, Mark would try one last move, one last desperate attempt to save himself. She had expected this. Mark had always been one to play dirty when backed into a corner, and this was no different. "That's not going to work," Sophia said firmly, standing up from her desk. "We've already got too much momentum. He's losing, and he knows it, but we need to act quickly. Get me on the phone with the federal investigators." Emily didn't hesitate. "I'll make the call." Sophia paced back and forth in her office, her thoughts racing. She had been so focused on taking down Mark and securing the future of the company that she had neglected the very real threat he still posed. He wasn't going to give up quietly, and now, with his back against the wall, he was willing to do anything to avoid facing the consequences. But she had planned for this. She had made sure that the audit, the investigation, and her proposal to the board were solid. They had a clear path forward, and there was no way Mark could stop it. Not anymore. The phone rang again, and this time it was Lucas. "We've been following Mark's movements. He's not making any moves on the sale, but he's about to release a statement to the media. He's trying to get ahead of the story." Sophia sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "What's he saying?" "He's claiming that this is all part of your personal vendetta against him," Lucas said. "He's trying to frame it as a bitter ex-wife trying to ruin the company. He's playing the victim." Sophia couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. Mark always did know how to twist the truth. He can't win this, not this time. But even as she said the words, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at her. Mark was desperate, and desperate people did unpredictable things. She couldn't afford to let her guard down now. "I want a full security detail in place," she said, her tone hardening. "I don't trust him, and I don't trust anyone who's still loyal to him." "I've already arranged it," Lucas replied. We've got eyes on all the key players. If anything moves, we'll know about it. Sophia nodded. She had learned the hard way how far Mark was willing to go to destroy her, but this time she wouldn't be caught off guard. She would protect herself, her team, and the company. Later that evening, as Sophia prepared for the press conference, she couldn't help but think back to when she had first met Mark. He had been charming, ambitious, and full of promise. He had made her believe in their partnership, in their future. And for a while, she had. But now, she saw the man for who he truly was, a liar, a manipulator, a man who would destroy anything in his path to save himself. As she stepped onto the stage, the cameras flashed, and the murmurs of the press filled the air. She was calm, composed, ready. She had already been through the worst of it. Now she was in control. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice carrying through the room. "I'm here today to address the recent developments surrounding the company I helped build and the investigation into its leadership." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Mark Matthews has spent the past few weeks trying to manipulate the narrative, claiming that this entire situation is a personal vendetta against him. But the truth is much simpler than that. The truth is that Mark Matthews has been lying to all of us, inflating the company's worth, hiding assets, and engaging in illegal practices that have put the future of this company in jeopardy. She watched as the reporters scribbled notes, their cameras focused on her. She could feel the shift in the room, the quiet realization that the truth was finally coming to light. "This isn't about me. This isn't about a divorce or personal drama," she continued. "This is about the integrity of the company, the people who work here, and the legacy we've built together. The company's future is secure, but we can't move forward until we address the damage that has been done." Sophia's voice grew more resolute. "Mark Matthews may have thought he could control the narrative, but the truth always finds its way to the surface, and when it does, we will rebuild. We will continue the work we started, and we will do it right." As the press conference concluded, Sophia felt a sense of accomplishment, but it was tempered with the awareness that Mark's final fight was far from over. She had exposed him to the world, but now he was going to try to strike back. The storm wasn't over yet. Sophia left the stage, the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had won the battle, but the war was still raging. Mark wouldn't stop until he had destroyed everything in his path. And now it was up to her to make sure that didn't happen. The following morning, the weight of the world felt a little lighter on Sophia's shoulders. The press conference had gone exactly as she had planned. Mark's lies had been exposed, and now the public saw him for what he truly was, a man who would destroy everything for his own survival. The media was buzzing with the aftermath of the conference, and it was clear that the tide was turning in her favor. But even as the world seemed to turn in her direction, Sophia knew better than to relax. She had spent too many years under Mark's thumb to believe that the fight was over just because the media was on her side. The real battle was still unfolding behind the scenes, and she was far from finished. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was an encrypted message from Lucas. She opened it quickly. "We've intercepted a conversation. Mark's legal team is trying to rally some of the remaining board members to vote on the sale to Global Tech. He's making his move now. He won't go down quietly." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She had expected Mark to make a final desperate play, but she hadn't anticipated it happening this quickly. If he managed to convince just a few of the board members to side with him, he could still pull the rug out from under her and force the sale through. She couldn't afford to let that happen. She stood up from her desk, the urgency of the situation sharpening her focus. "I'm heading to the boardroom," she texted Emily and Lucas. "Prepare the documents. We're locking this down today." Sophia's mind was already calculating her next move. She had the evidence. The board's support was wavering, and the federal investigation was continuing to build its case against Mark. But the sale to Global Tech represented everything Mark had ever been, a man more concerned with his personal wealth than the people who had made his company successful. He had nothing left to lose, and desperate people were dangerous. As she walked to the elevator, she felt the familiar pang of doubt in her chest. She had already been down this road with him before, back when he had promised things would change, that things would be better. But this time, Sophia knew the truth. There would be no going back. The elevator doors opened to the top floor, and as she stepped out, she was greeted by a few members of her team, their faces set with determination. Emily was already at the conference table, several legal documents spread out in front of her. "Everything's ready," Emily said, looking up from the papers. "We've secured the evidence against the sale. We've got the financial discrepancies, the emails, and the signed agreements from the board members who are against the deal. You're covered." Sophia nodded, her gaze fixed on the door to the boardroom. She couldn't afford any distractions now. She had to ensure that the board saw the sale for what it really was, Mark's final attempt to escape accountability. She couldn't let him manipulate his way out of this. The door to the boardroom opened, and the members started filtering in. Some were still loyal to Mark, others uncertain about what direction to take. As she stood at the head of the table, she could feel the weight of the moment. This was the turning point. If she failed here, everything she had worked for would unravel, but she wasn't about to fail. Sophia started the meeting, her voice steady and commanding. "We've all seen the news. Mark Matthews has spent the last few weeks trying to manipulate the narrative, claiming that the company is in a state of crisis, that the only way forward is to sell to Global Tech." A few of the board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had heard Mark's pitch, and some had been swayed by his charm. But the truth was now undeniable, and Sophia was determined to make sure they saw it. "However," she continued, "what you may not know is that Mark's actions, both in the financials and in his dealings with Global Tech, have been deceptive. He has misrepresented the company's value, inflated projections, and hidden financial discrepancies that would have made this sale illegal in any other context." She looked around the room, her gaze locking with a few of the board members. "I'm asking you to choose the future of this company, not based on Mark's lies, but on the truth. The company has a future, but not if we continue with this sale. We need to move forward with a full investigation and restructure, or we risk losing everything we've built." Mark's legal team, sitting at the other end of the table, exchanged tense glances. They knew this wasn't going well for them, but they tried to press on. One of Mark's remaining allies on the board, David, spoke up. "We can't just halt everything and throw the company into more uncertainty. Global Tech is offering us a solid deal. We can't afford to back out now." Sophia didn't flinch. "David, we cannot afford to continue under the assumption that Mark's actions were in the best interest of this company. The investigation is already revealing that there are far more serious implications here. You can't hide from the truth. Not anymore." The boardroom was silent. The tension was palpable. She knew the weight of this moment. The next few minutes would determine everything. Sophia's voice softened, but it carried a power that could not be denied. "We've built something extraordinary here, something that has changed the industry. I'm asking you to stand with me, to choose integrity over greed, truth over deception." The room was still. A few members exchanged looks, but the decision was already starting to take shape. Finally, the chairman, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I believe we need to conduct a full review. No decision can be made until the investigation is concluded. The sale to Global Tech is hereby suspended." Sophia felt a rush of relief, though she didn't let it show. This wasn't over, not yet. But this was a victory, a crucial one. As the meeting concluded, Sophia felt a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. She had stood her ground, and the company's future was now in her hands. She turned to Emily and Lucas as the board members filed out. We've won for now, but keep your eyes on Mark. This isn't over. He's going to come at us with everything he has. Emily nodded. We'll be ready. Sophia turned and walked toward the door, her head held high. She had taken the first step in reclaiming everything that had been stolen from her. The road ahead would be tough, but for the first time, Sophia felt ready for whatever came next. Mark's reign was over, and the company would rise again, this time on her terms. The days following the board meeting felt like a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. The sale to Global Tech was officially halted, but Mark's next move was still unclear. Sophia knew he wouldn't just walk away quietly. Desperate men, after all, were the most dangerous. She could almost feel the storm brewing in the distance. He was losing everything. And when someone like Mark had nothing left to lose, that's when they were at their most unpredictable. Sophia was back in her office, going over the details of the investigation, ensuring that everything was in place. Emily had been handling the media frenzy that was bound to follow, but Sophia knew the real fight was still internal. Mark had been the face of the company for years, but the truth was catching up with him faster than he had anticipated. Her phone buzzed again, and the message from Lucas made her heart skip. We've got a problem. Mark's been spotted at one of the company's warehouses. We're hearing rumors that he's trying to access confidential files and possibly destroy evidence. Sophia's stomach tightened. She had known it would come to this. Mark wasn't going to go down without trying to take everything with him. She picked up the phone and dialed Lucas. Get to that warehouse now. I need eyes on everything. If he's trying to destroy evidence, we need to make sure we stop him before it's too late. Lucas's voice was steady. Already on it. I'll send a team. Sophia hung up and took a deep breath. She could feel the tension creeping in, but she refused to let fear take hold. She had worked too hard to let Mark's last desperate act destroy everything. This time, he wasn't going to win. She wasn't going to let him get away with it. Minutes later, Emily entered the office, a grim expression on her face. I just got off the phone with the federal investigators. They've been tracking Mark's movements, and it looks like he's planning something bigger. He's trying to sell the company's intellectual property to other tech firms. It's not just about the sale anymore, Sophia. He's looking for a way out, no matter the cost. Sophia's eyes narrowed. He's trying to sell our technology? After everything? Emily nodded. If he does, it could devastate the company's future. The intellectual property is the heart of this business. Without it, we'd be nothing. Sophia's mind was already spinning, calculating the possible outcomes. Mark was playing his final hand, but he had underestimated her at every turn. She wasn't going to let him destroy everything she had worked for. We need to stop him, but we need to move fast, Sophia said, her voice hard with resolve. Get in touch with the legal team. I want an injunction filed against him immediately to prevent him from selling or transferring any assets. We'll need to lock down every single piece of intellectual property, and we'll need to do it now. Emily nodded quickly. I'll handle it, but we need to be prepared for the worst. He's desperate. Sophia stood up, walking toward the window, her mind racing. She had spent years fighting to get back to this moment, and she wasn't going to let Mark take it away from her now. She could feel the weight of the battle pressing in on her, but she refused to break. She had come too far. The phone rang again, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Lucas. We've got eyes on him. He's trying to break into the warehouse's security system. We've locked down the building, but he's moving fast. Sophia's heart raced. This was it. If Mark managed to get his hands on the company's files, it could all fall apart. Get the federal agents there now, she said, her voice sharp, and make sure no one leaves that building until we have everything we need. Lucas's voice was grim. We're on it. Sophia put the phone down, her hands gripping the edge of her desk. She knew Mark was cornered, but she also knew that a cornered animal could be the most dangerous kind. If he thought he could still escape, if he thought he could ruin everything one last time, he was gravely mistaken. She wasn't going to let it happen. Not now, not after everything. Minutes later, The team was in motion, and Sophia was already on her way to the warehouse. As she drove through the city, her mind was a blur of thoughts. She couldn't afford to think about what Mark might do next. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. This was her last chance to stop him. Once the evidence was gone, it would be too late. When Sophia arrived at the warehouse, the federal agents were already in place, their cars lining the street. She was greeted by Lucas, who quickly briefed her on the situation. "Mark's inside, but we've secured the perimeter. We've also got access to the building's security system. If he's trying to erase any files, we'll be able to track him." Sophia nodded, the weight of the moment settling over her. This was the last time Mark would ever have the chance to destroy what they had built. She wasn't going to let him take it from her again. "Let's do this," she said. The team moved in quickly, navigating through the dark, abandoned hallways of the warehouse. Every step felt like an eternity. When they finally reached the security room, they found Mark, his back turned as he frantically worked at the computer, his face twisted in a mixture of anger and desperation. "Sophia," Mark sneered, not even looking up, "you really think you've won? You think you can just walk in here and take everything from me?" Sophia's voice was cold and steady. "It's over, Mark. You've lost. And now you'll face the consequences for everything you've done." Mark turned to face her, his expression furious. "You think the feds are going to save you? They're just as corrupt as I am. You'll never get away with this." But Sophia didn't flinch. She knew it was over. Mark's last attempt at escape had failed. The evidence was locked down, and the investigation was already too far along. He could yell, he could fight, but it didn't matter anymore. He was done. As the agents took him into custody, Sophia felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. The battle had been long, but it was finally over. Mark Matthews, the man who had once controlled everything, was now nothing more than a footnote in her past. She watched as Mark was led away, his head down, his shoulders slumped in defeat. And for the first time, she felt no anger, no hatred, just a quiet, steadfast resolve. She had fought for her future, and now she was ready to take it back. The days following Mark's arrest felt like a mix of disbelief and triumph. The news spread like wildfire. The once powerful CEO of Matthews Technologies was now in federal custody, facing charges that would dismantle everything he had built. Sophia could barely keep up with the press requests, the interviews, and the constant flow of calls from her legal team. It was overwhelming, but it was a small price to pay for the freedom she now had. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. Mark was out of the picture, and the company was hers again. The future of Matthews Technologies, the company she had built, was now in her hands, where it belonged. But even as she relished in her victory, there was a nagging thought at the back of her mind. The battle with Mark had been hard fought, but it wasn't the only war she'd have to win. The company needed to be rebuilt. It needed to regain its strength, its trust, and most importantly, its reputation. Sophia sat at her desk in the newly restructured offices, looking at the documents in front of her. The next phase of her journey was about to begin, the rebuilding. She had already started working on the plan to restore the company's image, to gain back the trust of the investors who had been left in the dark. But that would take time. The damage Mark had caused wasn't going to disappear overnight. As she sorted through her to-do list, Emily walked into the office, a bright smile on her face. "I just got off the phone with the SEC," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "They've confirmed they'll be clearing you of all the legal complications surrounding the company. The investigation into Mark's fraud has officially wrapped up, and they're backing your leadership." Sophia couldn't help but smile. "That's a relief, but we've still got a lot of work to do. I want a full audit of every department. We need to make sure everything is as transparent as possible." Emily nodded. "I'll get started on it. And I think you should start thinking about the future of the company, Sophia. It's time to show the world that Matthews Technologies isn't just Mark's legacy. It's yours now." Sophia's gaze turned to the window, her mind already racing ahead. Emily was right. The next step was to build something new, something stronger. She had taken the company back, but now it was time to make it thrive. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was a road Sophia was ready to walk. She had the power, the vision, and most importantly, the heart to lead the company into a new era. She wasn't just going to recover what Mark had taken, she was going to make it better. And nothing, no one, would stop her. The weeks passed, and with each passing day, Sophia felt the weight of leadership settling into her bones. The company was recovering, but it wasn't an easy journey. The restructuring was painful, the audits painstaking, but each step brought Matthews Technologies closer to a future that Sophia could believe in. Her phone buzzed once again. It was a message from Lucas. "We've received a new offer from a tech conglomerate. They're interested in purchasing our intellectual property. Do you want to consider it?" Sophia frowned. The sale of their intellectual property had been Mark's final act of desperation, but now that he was out of the picture, there was no reason for her to sell off their hard-earned assets. Not when the company still had so much potential. She quickly typed a response. "We're not selling. Focus on rebuilding, not cashing out." She leaned back in her chair, taking a deep breath. It was easy to feel the pressure when the company was constantly in the public eye. But selling off pieces of their future, just to make a quick buck, was not the solution. She had bigger plans. Her vision for the future was clear. Matthews Technologies was going to be more than just a company. It was going to be a beacon of resilience, a testament to the power of rebuilding from the ground up. It would be an example for other businesses, other people who had been knocked down, that it was possible to come back stronger. That was her goal. That was her mission. The next meeting was with the investors. They had supported her after Mark's downfall, but she knew that their patience was running thin. They wanted results, and they wanted them fast. The pressure was on. But she was ready. She had proven herself in ways they couldn't have imagined. Now it was time to show them that Matthews Technologies was about to enter its brightest era yet. As she walked into the conference room for the meeting, she was greeted by the same faces who had once doubted her. But this time, the air was different. They knew who she was now. They knew what she was capable of. And as she sat down at the head of the table, she felt a surge of confidence. "The company is back on track," Sophia began, her voice steady and commanding. "We've rebuilt our infrastructure, re-established our core values, and we're more transparent than ever before. We've cleared the debt, and we've ensured that every part of the business is in compliance. It's time to start thinking about the next step, the next big move." She could see the investors listening intently, their faces softening with approval. "We are not just a company rebuilding after a crisis. We are a company poised for greatness, and I'm asking for your support as we move forward into the next phase." Sophia's heart beat faster, but her voice never wavered. "It's time to think bigger. We're not selling our future to anyone. We're going to innovate, grow, and lead. Matthews Technologies is going to be the company of tomorrow, and we're going to show the world what we're capable of." As the meeting ended, Sophia felt the weight of her words settle into the room. She had taken control of her future, and now she was ready to take control of the company's. Months passed, and the company continued to recover under Sophia's leadership. The investors were pleased with the progress, and the media had largely stopped focusing on the scandal of the past. But despite the outward signs of success, Sophia knew there was still work to be done. She had made it this far, but the road ahead remained uncertain. One afternoon, as she was reviewing the latest project reports, Emily entered her office. There was something different in her expression, a look that Sophia recognized all too well. It was the look of someone about to deliver difficult news. "Sophia, I think you should see this," Emily said, handing her a folder. "It's from one of the journalists who've been covering the company. They've uncovered something about Mark's dealings before he left. It's bad. Sophia's stomach dropped. What is it? Emily sat down across from her. They've found proof that Mark was involved in more than just financial misdeeds. He's been connected to a group that was using the company's resources for illicit purposes. It goes beyond the fraud. There's a network of illegal activities that stretches further than we thought. Sophia's mind raced. How far does this go? Emily hesitated, then spoke. It's deeper than we realize, Sophia, and we might not be able to escape it if we don't act fast. There's a risk this could bring everything down again. Sophia took a deep breath. This was the moment she had feared. The world had already seen Mark's downfall, but now there was a new threat looming. They would have to act quickly, decisively. There was no time to waste. They couldn't let the company's hard-won success be overshadowed by the mistakes of the past. We fight back, Sophia said, her voice hardening. We expose everything. We protect the company, and we make sure the world knows the full story. The battle wasn't over. It was just starting again. But this time, Sophia was ready. The investigation into Mark's underground dealings became the next chapter of Sophia's battle for control. She had thought the worst was over, but the depth of Mark's betrayal ran deeper than anyone had imagined. With the press once again breathing down their necks, Sophia knew the stakes had never been higher. The legal team worked tirelessly to manage the crisis, but it wasn't just about damage control. It was about laying bare the truth, confronting the darkness head-on, and doing whatever it took to protect Matthews Technologies from collapsing once again. Sophia gave a statement to the media, setting the record straight. The actions of Mark Matthews were a betrayal not just of the company, but of the very people who trusted him. He used his position to manipulate resources for personal gain. But we will not be defined by his mistakes. We will be defined by our resilience. The company's stock dipped in the immediate aftermath, but Sophia's calm leadership and transparency began to win back the public's trust. Matthews Technologies would survive this, just as it had survived everything else. But this time, it would be stronger for it. By the end of the year, Matthews Technologies was no longer just recovering, it was thriving. The company was once again profitable, its new leadership structure firmly in place, and its employees united under the banner of integrity and innovation. Sophia had built something from the ground up, something that was now unshakable. She had faced betrayal, deceit, and unimaginable challenges. But through it all, she had come out on top, not by running from her past, but by confronting it head-on. As she stood in the company's new headquarters, looking out over the city, Sophia felt a quiet pride settle in her heart. She had rebuilt Matthews Technologies, not just as a business, but as a legacy, one that would continue to grow and evolve. The worst was behind her. The future was waiting. And for the first time in years, Sophia allowed herself to smile.